The emblem on the podium, I think it's so hideous, and I hate it. I didn't want to use this podium. I'm like, can we cover it? Because we're like rebranding kind of right now.
It is a little dated.
So I'm like, oh, nuts.
All right, everybody ready to go? All right, first, thank you all for being here this morning. Just a couple of ground rules real quick. Well, let me introduce myself. My name is Clint Pulpin. I'm the lieutenant over the Community Services Division. I am the lead PIO. There will be a press conference. After that, there will be a Q&A for y'all. If you would, please hold all your questions until the sheriff is done speaking. When you do raise your hands, if you would provide your name and the affiliate you're here representing, please, and then I will come speak back after he's done to give you all a few more directions. We will provide more information later as more information comes out. And that is it. With that, I would like to introduce Sheriff Anthony Hippolito, ANTHONYHIPLITO. Next to him would be Chief Deputy Brett Bailey, Captain Julie Villapando, Captain Chris Treat.
Appreciate it, Lieutenant. Thank you so much. Good morning, and I want to thank each and every one of you guys for making it down here. I've been in law enforcement for 27 years, and integrity is everything when it comes to law enforcement, right? So I campaigned, well, I've been the sheriff here since January 1st, and during my 2+ year campaign, I talked about accountability. I talked about holding ourselves to a higher standard in law enforcement. I talked about transparency. I talked about being an open book. I talked about telling you guys, the community, when we do a good job. But I also talked about telling the community when we fall short. And that's why we're here today. We sent that press release out late last night, but that press release went out just minutes after one of our corrections officers was arrested. It's important for me as a sheriff and our executive team to be as open and transparent as possible, especially when it comes to one of our own messing up or getting in trouble or getting arrested, as in this case. So I'll get into some of the details. Obviously, this is an ongoing criminal case as well as an internal case that is ongoing as well. This has been pretty difficult for a lot of folks here at the agency. You don't ever want to investigate one of your own, so I have to commend a few folks. I won't name them by name, but our folks in our criminal investigation division who got this probably just 10 to 14 days ago and put everything else aside and did the work necessary and issued warrants yesterday. I also want to thank our folks in our Office of Professional Responsibility. Our investigators there, our sergeants, have been on this case since about April 6th, and it's difficult for them, and I acknowledge that, but I have to publicly thank them for the work that they have put in over the last 2.5, 3 weeks. So with that being said, on April 4th, 2025, one of our corrections lieutenants was notified by a female inmate who is our victim in this particular case, that she was being sexually either harassed or there was a corrections officer that was doing things that were inappropriate, sexual misconduct, right? I have to also say that we've already been getting some questions about why isn't there some sexual assault charges being filed. There, to our knowledge at this point during the investigation, there's not been any physical contact at all between the inmate, the victim, and our corrections officer. Anytime that we get a complaint like that or an outcry, they're taken very seriously, as you would expect, right? An internal investigation started immediately. I believe it started April 6th once our investigators got back to work. So it's just important to know that it was handled immediately and the investigation started. Early on in this internal investigation, it was learned that there was probably going to be some aspects of a possible crime that took place. So our internal investigation stopped at that point, and we requested our criminal investigation division, our detective, to start a criminal inquiry into possible criminal acts that our corrections officer took place. So over the last 2 weeks, they have gathered the facts and talked to our victim and talked to our corrections officer. And as last night, they, I'll identify the corrections officer at this point. His name is John Duran. He has been employee of the Hays County Sheriff's Office since July of 2022. And the warrants and the charges that were filed yesterday are official oppression, which is a Class A misdemeanor, and tampering with a governmental record, a state jail felony. Now, whether or not, so I don't want to get in too much detail about exactly what our corrections officer did. I know that'll all be in our probable cause affidavit that's out there. But whether our corrections officer encouraged or coerced or talked her into doing anything sexually, it doesn't matter. Whether he touched her or not, he used the power of his position, the badge, the patch, the full uniform, the handcuffs, to either encourage or coerce this victim to do things sexually and very inappropriate. And I want everyone to know that if any of our employees do that, they will be held accountable to the higher standard. That is not something that will ever be tolerated here at the Hays County Sheriff's Office. I've been a cop for 27 years, and there's nothing worse than a person disgracing the badge. So that will never be tolerated here at the Hays County Sheriff's Office. In regards to the tampering with a governmental record, when he applied here in July of 2022 on his sworn application, one of the questions on the application was essentially, have you ever been involved in internal investigation by one of your employers? He essentially on that affidavit, on the application, said he has not. Throughout this investigation, we have done some more digging, and we have learned that he had indeed been under 3 or 4 different investigations when he was an employee of the state of Texas. So when you attempt to defraud any governmental agency and submit an application that is not true, you are tampering with that governmental record, and hence the charge of tampering with a governmental record. Any questions? Yes.
Hi, Kelsey Sanchez with the meeting. I understand that you in January, and you had said that you were going to look into how to kind of solve the jail issues, because in the past it's been overcrowding, short staff, and alleged mistreatment with the correctional officers.
Yep.
Now running into the tamper with this application process. I mean, how do you guys go forward, and what has the county been doing to address these issues so these inmates don't fall victim to these crimes?
Yeah, so I have the utmost confidence in our corrections officers and anybody that works here at the Hays County Sheriff's Office. I understand your question, and it's fair. So what we're going to do is go back over time and review applications of employees who are now employed here to ensure that we indeed do a thorough background. I'm confident in everyone that works inside that correctional facility at the jail. Our supervisors are, obviously they're held to a higher standard, right? But again, this is not a supervisory issue. This is a very isolated incident that this particular investigation points to no one other than Officer Duran. And I did fail to mention that Officer Duran was immediately placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the internal investigation, which is obviously ongoing and should be done here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And when that is completed, we will update you guys as well.
And can you clarify in the release, it did say that he wasn't a subject to any internal investigation. Is that just in Hays County, just to be clear?
Yeah, during the 3 years or almost 3 years that he's been employed here, he has not been a subject of any internal investigations by our OPR office.
And aside from that, has there been any incidents or complaints with this corrections officer since he's been employed?
No, not to my knowledge, no.
And how's the victim doing today?
I have not talked to the victim. I believe the victim is no longer in our jail. She's been released. And I have to thank her as well. If she didn't come forward and talk to one of our lieutenants at the jail and, and make that outcry, we would not know about it. So without her cooperation in this investigation, we couldn't have got to this point. So I have to thank her as well.
And going back to my first question, just about the overcrowding and short staff, can you speak to how the county is handling that, in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when it comes to staffing, we're just I think 2 or 3 positions that are unfilled in our corrections facility. We have, we plan on asking for additional bodies in our upcoming budget. But before that, we're going to be asking our Commissioners Court for 16 more corrections officers here in the next couple of weeks, with the goal of getting them trained, obviously staffed and trained by the end of September, which would also allow us to bring some of our outsourced inmates back. Yes.
Richard Webner from the Express News. Where did he work for the state of Texas? And could you share anything about the investigations he's been a part of? And is it a practice for you to reach out to organizations that they worked for before and ask questions about the people?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. He was employed at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. I believe he worked in a prison. And according to our warrant that was issued yesterday, he was engaged in trading a contraband, which he got 6 months probation for. That was in 2010. In 2014, he had a prisoner cut his hair, which is also a violation of their authority, court order, and policies. And then he was not, when he left the TDCJ, he was actually under investigation at that time in giving false statements. So I will say, again, when we mess up, I'm going to tell you, right? At this point, it looks like the background that was done at that time wasn't sufficient, right? So that leads to obviously several other questions, and that's why, as an executive team, we're going to go back and over time look at the employees that are employed here and do a deep dive to ensure that this never happens again. It's not acceptable.
And a further question, could you share anything more about the nature of his interactions with the inmates? And
Yeah.
also, are you doing anything to check whether he might have done anything with other inmates?
Yes, so what he essentially did in one of the instances is after rack up. What rack up means is after they go to bed, they were supposed to stay in their bunks. He essentially woke the victim up and encouraged her to get in the shower. And he used his computer screen, because there's a camera above the shower, and he essentially watched her shower. Whether she agreed to it or not, it doesn't matter. Again, he used his power and his position to get her in that position. I don't care if she agreed to it or not. It's just unacceptable and will not be tolerated at this agency.
I'm sorry, have you
Check-
checked whether he might have done this with other inmates?
Yeah, so that's all part of the internal investigation that our Office of Professional Responsibility is doing. I can assure you that the sergeants that are working in that division are very experienced investigators. And again, they have put down all their work over the last 2.5 weeks and have dove deep into everything Officer Duran in this particular incident. Just like you, I don't want anybody like Officer Duran working at any law enforcement agency, and definitely not at this one. So it's our job as an executive team to ensure and take the steps necessary to ensure that this doesn't happen ever again. And this is something, I hope this is the last time in my tenure as Hays County Sheriff, which I hope is a long time, that I will ever have to take part in this or arrest one of our employees. But we will. If they're taking part in misconduct or if they're doing things that are criminal, I can assure you when we find out about it, just like in this case, that we will take swift action to ensure that that employee is handled the correct way.
And could you say when he left the employment of the state? And you said, I think you indicated that he had resigned, is that right?
He resigned under investigation, and I believe that was, I don't have his background in front of me, but I think it was June of 2014-ish. And I should know and I can get that to you later, what kind of job he held between that time, by the time he was there and he was hired here at this. But again, this person probably shouldn't have been hired. And again, we have to take steps to ensure that this doesn't ever happen again, because we deserve better, our inmates deserve better, and the public deserves better. And as the sheriff of Hays County, I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure that everyone in this agency has the highest amount of integrity. And when they screw up, they tell us about it. And it's just, we don't want anybody that takes actions like what Officer Duran did to work here. So, any other questions?
Sheriff Ed Zavala with KXAN. After your internal investigation, if the corrections officer is indeed found culpable, what are the next steps? Or what does your office do, and what possible punishment could he incur?
Yeah, so the possibility is obviously termination, right? But our executive team has to wait for the completion of that internal affairs investigation. They will review it and then make a determination on whether these actions actually took place and what the discipline will be. But obviously, if we have a preponderance of evidence that this took place, termination is obviously where we're going to go. Any other questions?
To go into more detail of what you were saying earlier, I mean, are you going to seek changes in the way that you hire? Are you going to change the way you do background checks?
I don't know if we're going to change the way we do it, but we have to, and I'm confident in the individuals that are currently doing backgrounds. I'm confident that they are doing everything in their power to ensure that anything like this doesn't happen. But again, we have to be thorough. Basically, in a place like this, in a law enforcement agency, we have to overstep and make sure that we're looking at every step of this person's background and talk to everybody possible and do a very thorough background to ensure that we don't miss something like this. This should have easily been caught. I don't care if this didn't happen, if it happened yesterday or happened 5 years ago. As a law enforcement agency, something like this should never happen. But again, we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes, but if we learn from them and we grow and we get better, that's what I think the community expects of any law enforcement agency.
Last question.
I appreciate it. Again, thanks you guys so much for coming out.
The room